He was 25 years old, and nobody on earth wanted to fight him. Not one person. That was the reality of Mike Tyson in the summer of 1991. He had already done things no heavyweight had ever done before. Youngest champion in history at just 20 years old. Unified all three major belts. Walked into arenas and made grown men, trained fighters, professionals, visibly shake before the opening bell even rang. Cameras caught it. The whole world saw it. And that fear? It only made the legend bigger. But here's what most people don't know about that summer. Underneath all of it, the fame, the power, the money, something was already breaking. His marriage to actress Robin Givens had just collapsed on live national television. She sat next to him on ABC and looked into the camera and said her life with Mike Tyson was pure hell. Tyson sat beside her, still, saying almost nothing. The whole country watched. Then there was Cus D'Amato. D'Amato had been the architect of everything. He found Tyson in a juvenile detention center, a scared, angry kid from Brownsville, Brooklyn, and turned him into the most feared fighter alive. Structure, discipline, purpose. D'Amato gave him all of it. But D'Amato had been dead since 1985. And the men who replaced him, Don King, a rotating cast of handlers, were not the same. Not even close. Without D'Amato, the discipline started cracking. And then, in February 1990, it broke wide open. Buster Douglas, a 42-1 underdog, knocked Tyson out cold in Tokyo. The most feared man in the world was on the canvas. People couldn't believe what they were watching. For the first time, the world saw something it had never seen before. Mike Tyson was human. He came back, of course, knocked out Henry Tillman, dominated Alex Stewart, beat Donovan Ruddock twice. The power was still there. The name still sold out arenas and moved massive pay-per-view numbers. But something had shifted. The myth had a crack in it, and that crack is what made what happened next so devastating. In mid-July 1991, Tyson traveled to Indianapolis. He was there for events connected to the Indiana Black Expo and the Miss Black America pageant. The city was alive that week. Hotels packed, venues buzzing. Young women from across the country had come to compete for the title, surrounded by their families, their coaches, and a steady stream of celebrities moving through every event. Tyson was the biggest name in the room. Every room. He was physically impossible to miss. An entourage around him at all times. Everyone stopped when he walked in. That's the atmosphere in which he first met Desiree Washington. She was 18 years old, a freshman at Providence College in Rhode Island. She was there as Miss Black Rhode Island, one of the official pageant contestants. She had grown up in Coventry, Rhode Island, in a religious household. By every account from the people who knew her, she was not there chasing celebrities. She was not there looking for trouble. She was there to compete. That's it. Tyson spent time with several contestants that week. He was photographed with groups of them, friendly, accessible. Famous people often are when they're away from home and the pressure drops a little. On the evening of July 18th, he and Washington spoke briefly. He asked for her number. She gave it to him. Then sometime after midnight, deep in the early hours of July 19th, his phone call came. He invited her to come out with him. She said yes. His limousine pulled up to her hotel. She got in. And what happened next, inside a suite at the Canterbury Hotel in downtown Indianapolis, would destroy one of the most powerful careers in sports history, and it would change both of their lives forever. The night started simply enough. Tyson, Washington, and his bodyguard drove around the city. They stopped at a Denny's. They talked. Normal enough, at least on the surface. Then Tyson invited her back to his suite at the Canterbury. She went. And that is where the two accounts of this story split completely apart. And they have never, in over 30 years, come back together. According to Desiree Washington, once they were inside that suite, everything changed. Tyson became aggressive, physical. She told him to stop. More than once. Clearly, he did not stop. She said she was raped. She left the hotel within hours. She went immediately to event staff, then to police. That same morning, on July 19th, She underwent a full medical examination. The physical evidence collected during that exam would later become one of the most critical pieces of the prosecution's entire case. She did not hesitate. She did not disappear. She did not recant. She walked into a police station, told her story, and never changed a single word of it. Tyson's version was the complete opposite. Everything that happened was consensual, he said. She came willingly. She wanted to be there. Nothing was forced. He has said it in interviews, in his memoir, on stage, in his 2013 Broadway show, on podcasts, in documentary after documentary, for more than 30 years. The exact same claim. Two people, one hotel room, two completely different stories. That gap, that impossible, irreconcilable gap, is the center of everything that followed. The legal system moved fast. Marion County Prosecutor Jeffrey Modisette reviewed the evidence and decided to take it to trial. Tyson was formally charged with rape, criminal deviant conduct, and confinement. The charges carried the kind of sentences that could put him away for decades. Tyson hired serious firepower. His lead attorney was Vincent Fuller of Williams & Connolly, a top Washington, D.C. firm. These were the same lawyers who had represented John Hinckley Jr. in the attempted assassination trial of Ronald Reagan. Fuller was sharp, polished, experienced. This was not a man who lost cases. The trial opened on January 27, 1992. Judge Patricia Gifford presiding. Indianapolis was suddenly the center of the world. Media from across the country and from abroad flooded the courthouse. Camera crews camped on the steps. Every single day of testimony was treated like breaking news, because it was. This was Mike Tyson, the most feared man in sports, sitting at a defense table, facing prison. The prosecution was led by J. Michael Kearns. His strategy was disciplined and direct. He called Desiree Washington to the stand, and she told her story. She was composed, specific, consistent. She did not waver. She described the moment inside the suite when Tyson's demeanor changed. She described what she said and exactly what he did in response. She described why she didn't physically fight back against a man who was, by any objective measure, one of the most physically powerful human beings on the planet. That detail mattered enormously. Because a lot of people, then and since, have asked the obvious, uncomfortable question. Why didn't she fight back harder? Why didn't she leave? The prosecution went directly at that question. Expert witnesses testified about the psychology of assault survivors, about the freeze response, about why the absence of violent physical resistance is not the same thing as consent. These were not widely understood ideas in 1992. The national conversation about sexual violence was nowhere near where it would eventually go. But Kearns made sure the jury understood it. And then there was the physical evidence. The physician who examined Washington on the morning of July 19th testified about what she found. There was physical trauma, documented, consistent with Washington's account. This was not just one person's word against another's. There was evidence. Now, the defense. Fuller built his case on a single core argument. Everything was consensual. Washington had come to the hotel room willingly. She had given Tyson her phone number. She had gotten into his limousine after midnight. These, Fuller argued, were the choices of someone who knew exactly what she was agreeing to. He pushed hard on her decisions, her motivations, her character. It was the playbook defense attorneys have used in these cases for decades, and it was brutal to watch. But then Fuller made a decision that legal analysts are still debating today. He did not put Tyson on the stand. Think about what that means. The most famous man in the room. A man whose entire claim was that this woman was lying about him, and his own lawyer decided the jury should never hear him say it under oath. The reasoning was understandable. Tyson on cross-examination was a wild card. His history, his volatility, his reputation, all of it could turn against him the moment a skilled prosecutor started asking questions he didn't want to answer. But the consequence was enormous. The jury sat through weeks of testimony. They heard Desiree Washington tell her story in detail under oath. They heard medical professionals describe what the physical evidence showed, and they never heard Mike Tyson answer for any of it. Not one word under oath. The jury deliberated for 10 hours. 10 hours. And then they came back. The courtroom went silent. The verdict was read aloud. Guilty. Guilty on rape. Guilty on criminal deviate conduct. Guilty on confinement. Judge Gifford sentenced Tyson to 6 years, 4 years suspended. He would serve a minimum of 3 before he could come up for release. Inmate number 922335, the most feared man alive, was going to prison. The reaction split the country down the middle almost instantly. People who believed Washington said justice had finally been done, that a man who had used his size and his fame and his power to assault a young woman was being held accountable, that the system had worked. People who believed Tyson said the opposite, that his reputation had convicted him, that the jury saw a violent man in a courtroom and made their decision before the evidence was even finished. Don King, who had millions of dollars riding on Tyson's future fights, declared loudly that it was a travesty, that the real Mike Tyson was innocent. Other celebrities lined up on both sides. The debate was everywhere. And in the middle of all of it was Desiree Washington. 18 years old when she got into that limousine. Still a teenager when she sat on that witness stand and told a packed courtroom what had happened to her. She never wanted to be famous. Let that sink in. She did not go to police because she wanted attention. She did not testify in one of the most watched trials in American sports history because she was chasing the spotlight. She did it knowing the entire country would examine her life, question her choices, and call her a liar in front of millions of people. She did it anyway, and then she tried to disappear back into a private life. Tyson was sent to the Indiana Youth Center in Plainfield, Indiana. He was 25 when the doors closed behind him. Inside, he read, voraciously by his own account, history, philosophy, political theory. He discovered Mao Zedong's writings. He converted to Islam. He trained when he could. By most accounts, he was a model prisoner. When he walked out on March 25, 1995, after roughly 3 years, he had missed what should have been the absolute peak of his athletic prime. Boxing had not waited. Evander Holyfield had risen. Riddick Bowe had come and gone as champion. Lennox Lewis was building something serious. The landscape had completely changed. But Tyson's name, still electric. His first comeback fight, against Peter McNeely in August 1995, ended in under 90 seconds and generated massive pay-per-view numbers. Not because anyone expected a great fight, but because the whole world wanted to see what Mike Tyson still was. He looked like himself again. He knocked out Buster Mathis Jr. He recaptured the WBC title from Frank Bruno, won the WBA title from Bruce Seldon. For a moment, just a moment, it looked like the comeback was real. Then came Evander Holyfield, November 9th, 1996. Tyson was the heavy favorite. Holyfield was supposed to lose. Holyfield stopped him in round 11. The rematch was June 28, 1997. And that's the fight where it all finally, completely fell apart. Third round. Tyson bit off a piece of Evander Holyfield's ear. Not a tap. A chunk. Spit it onto the canvas. He was disqualified. Banned from boxing for a year. Fined $3 million. The image of that moment traveled around the world in hours. It was the perfect, grotesque symbol of a career that had gone completely off the rails. He fought on. He beat some opponents. He lost to Lennox Lewis in 2002, stopped in the 8th round. His finances, despite making somewhere north of $300 million over his career, collapsed into bankruptcy. The mansion, the tigers, the cars, gone. All of it. And through every single one of those years, the same question kept coming back up. Indianapolis. Every interview, every profile, every time a journalist sat down with Mike Tyson, he always gave the same answer. It was consensual. She was lying. He was wrongly convicted. The same answer in his memoir. The same answer on stage at his Broadway show. The same answer on Joe Rogan's podcast. The same answer in every documentary. Never a crack. Never a qualification. Now stop and think about that for a second, because here is what makes this case so genuinely complicated, not just emotionally but historically. The early 1990s were already a charged, raw moment for these conversations in America. Just months after the Indianapolis incident, Anita Hill sat before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee and testified about sexual harassment. She was composed. She was specific. She was credible, and a room full of powerful men treated her like she wasn't. The message a lot of women received from watching that was blunt and cold. Come forward and get destroyed. Desiree Washington came forward anyway. And then there was the racial dimension of the case, one that people talked about openly at the time and that has never fully resolved. Tyson was a black man. Washington was a black woman. This wasn't a racial dynamic of the kind that had defined other notorious cases of the era, but it existed in a country with a long documented history of black men being convicted, sometimes wrongly, sometimes in proceedings that fell far short of justice, for crimes against women. Some in the black community looked at the verdict and saw that history. Others pointed out that the same instinct to question every conviction involving a black defendant could, in this specific case, be used to erase the experience of a black woman who said she had been violated. Neither of those conversations was simple. Neither of them resolved. What the legal record does say is this: a jury of 12 people, after hearing everything, both sides, all the evidence, 10 hours of deliberation, found Tyson guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The Indiana Court of Appeals reviewed the case in 1993 and upheld the conviction. The Indiana Supreme Court declined to hear his appeal. The conviction stands. And Desiree Washington? In 2003, she gave a rare interview to People magazine. She said she had no regrets about going to the police. She described a long, hard process of healing. She didn't sound vengeful. She didn't sound broken. She sounded like someone who had survived something terrible and was slowly, carefully building a life on the other side of it. She never came back to the spotlight. That was her choice. Maybe the only real power she had in any of this. The power to walk away from it. Tyson, meanwhile, has become something genuinely strange and fascinating in American culture. He is funny. Surprisingly, disarmingly funny. He went on podcasts and made people laugh. He appeared in movies. He became a meme. A new generation of fans discovered him and loved him without ever having watched him fight in his prime. He talked openly about his drug use, about the financial disasters, about his childhood in Brownsville and what those years of poverty and violence actually did to him. He has shown real self-awareness about large parts of his life. But on Indianapolis, the self-awareness stops. Dead stop. His position on that night has never changed by a single word in over 30 years. Which means one of two things is true. Either Mike Tyson is a man who was genuinely wrongly convicted of a crime he did not commit. And that does happen in America. It has always happened. The history of wrongful convictions in this country is real and documented and devastating. Or he is a man who did something terrible to a young woman and has spent 30 years telling himself and everyone else a story that lets him live with it. There is no third option. And the evidence in the public record, the jury verdict, the physical findings from that morning examination, the consistency of Washington's account across years and years of scrutiny, does not make it easy to land comfortably on either side. This is what makes the case impossible to put down. A phone call after midnight, a limousine, a hotel suite, 2 people, 2 stories that cannot both be true. Tyson lost 3 years of his prime. He lost the version of himself that might have existed if the years had gone differently. That sharp, D'Amato-trained machine at the absolute peak of his powers. He came back and made hundreds of millions of dollars and lost all of it, and rebuilt pieces of himself, and broke apart again over and over, the way some people just do. And Desiree Washington, who was 18 years old, who was just there to compete in a pageant, who got into a limousine in the middle of the night and came out the other side of it with her name attached forever to one of the worst nights of her life. She carried a different kind of weight, the weight of being publicly disbelieved. The weight of being called a liar by millions of people who weren't in that room. The weight of becoming, in some corners of the internet, a villain in someone else's story. She has carried it quietly, out of the spotlight, away from all of it. More than 30 years later, the case still surfaces every time Tyson's name comes up. Every interview, every documentary, every time America sits down to reckon with what it believes about power and celebrity and who gets protected and who gets left behind. The jury believed Desiree Washington. The appellate court found no reason to overturn the verdict. The physical evidence pointed in one direction. And the man at the center of it all, who was inmate number 922335 and is now in his late 50s, a grandfather, still recognizable anywhere on earth, has never stopped saying that all of it was wrong. July 19th, 1991. A hotel suite in Indianapolis. One night, two people, two stories, and more than 30 years of an America that still can't agree on which one is true.
So, that's the end of this story, but there are plenty of other great ones right here. Before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that little bell.